Good afternoon, students. This is Anshu Sharma, Government College Chaksu, BA Part 2. We have been doing, as it is there on your screens, Thomas Gray's Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. We've done quite a bit of it, and I had yesterday finished it till here, where the poet is talking about how the departed soul, how the simple graves are constructed, the crude tombstone is constructed on their graves. And he says that the simple words written or the simple words inscribed or carved out on the tombstone, they kind of, request or ask the passerby for some sympathy for the departed soul. So here I had ended here. Let's continue with the next paragraphs. It is there on your screens, as you can see. Let me just quickly read the passages here given on the screen. Their name, their ears, spelt by the unlettered muse, the place of fame and elegy supply, and many a holy text around she strews, that teach the rustic moralist to die. For who, to dumb forgetfulness a prey, this pleasing anxious being ever resigned, left the warm precincts of the cheerful day, nor cast one longing lingering look behind. On some fond breast the parting soul relies, some pious drops the closing eye requires. Even from the tomb the voice of nature cries, even in our ashes live their wonted fires. So here, in these three paragraphs, the same idea of how the departed soul feels, how the person who's about to leave this world expects what he or she expects from the near and dear ones or from the family and friends. That is what is expressed here very beautifully. And from the fourth paragraph onwards, as you can see on your screens, I have mentioned it also. There, Gray is going to talk about himself. There's a change in the person whom the poem is being addressed to. The first three paragraphs, they continue with the idea that I have been talking about, and from the fourth paragraph onwards, there's a change in the person to whom these lines are being addressed. So let's do the first three first. Now, the first passage, the word meanings are there. You can see them. Now, he says, their name, their years, spelled by the unlettered muse. Now, this is from the previous paragraph. The same idea is being continued here because the name of these people, then the time span of their life, all of it has been recorded by the uneducated poet belonging to the country. So, the verses are nothing very grand, right? And even the spellings are not correct because the person who's written them is not very educated. The place of fame and elegy supply, this is referring to a comparison with the famous words or with the long epitaphs that are written on the gravestones, on the tombstones of the very rich or the very famous people. So instead of these long epitaphs or instead of long poems written in a very decorous manner, they have these small, simple, pithy lines which have been taken from maybe the Bible or some sacred texts, and they have been inscribed simply on the tombstone. So, in place of grand elegies, in place of grand epitaphs, or in place of great poetry, just these small lines are made use of. And he says, and many a holy text around she strews. So, strews means scattered, and holy text is specifically reference to Bible. So he says that over the tombs, along with the names are the years that are inscribed, and also there are no long epitaphs, and on the tombs only some beautiful sentences from the Bible have been taken, and these supply the required details on the gravestone of these simple people. And he says that these lines, they teach the rustic moralist to die. Now this is very important. Moralist is a person who practices morality. Now this word is extremely important because this is not referring to those people who are just talking about morals. This is actually referring to the villagers, the simple villagers who actually practice what they preach. They are simple people. They don't know trickery. They don't know jargon. They don't know anything related to the cities or anything very grand. They are very simple people, and they actually do, or you can say they practice exactly what they talk about, exactly what they preach. So the person who actually practices morality, actually practices the good life, actually upholds the morals, those people are being referred to here. And they teach the rustic moralist to die means that these words, these lines that have been taken from the Bible and which have been inscribed on these simple tombstones, they teach people that there is nothing to worry about, or there is nothing to fear as far as death is concerned. It is something which is a truth, and that is something which has to be accepted by one and all. So the poet says that these small pithy lines which have been taken from the Bible and which have been engraved on the tombstone, they teach all those people who are living in the villages, or all those people who pass by, or all those people who come to visit, to pay their respect to the departed people. They teach them for the future that there is nothing to worry about, or there is nothing to fear in death. If you have lived a very moralistic, very proper, or a kind life, then your death also would be very peaceful, and there is nothing to fear about. So this is what the poet talks about here in this paragraph. Then in the second paragraph, what does he say? He continues with the same idea. He says, for who to dumb forgetfulness a prey means victim. Okay, for who to dumb forgetfulness a prey, displeasing anxious being ever resigned, left the warm precincts of the cheerful day, nor cast one long lingering look behind. Now look at the word play on L sound, longing, lingering look, it's the idea of a person who's about to depart, how he's unwilling to leave this world. He is unwilling to leave the comfort of his home. He's unwilling to leave the love and the joy, the simple joy, the simple happiness that he derives out of his family life. So there is a longing, there is a wistful look in the eyes, and there's an very what would you say, there's a I think long is the right word, long look that a person gives when he is about to leave. So he says that it is not only the rich, but also the poorest of the poor also want that they should be remembered after their death. When you're alive, you find your peace, you find your joy amongst your family, amongst the people whom you love, or whom you are loved by, right? So similarly he says that despite the fact that the life for these village people has not been very smooth, or has not been very easy, because it has been full of worries, it has been full of poverty, and there has been quite a lot of miseries that they've had to face, yet the life has been sweet and pleasant. And nobody, howsoever poor or simple or humble that person might be, is ever leaving this world willingly. You know, death is not something which people are comfortable about, and nobody is ready to die. And when the time comes, it has to come and it will come, but when the time comes, people, they look back longingly at their family, they look back longingly at their loved ones. And somehow the people are unsure about death, and they feel that the world after death is going to be a dark place where everything is forgotten. They would also forget their memories, and the people who are left behind, they would also forget them after some time. So they are reluctant to leave this world, because the world that they are going to go to after death is supposed to be cold, is supposed to be dark, it is supposed to be lacking in warmth, is supposed to be lacking all the loved ones, all the friends, all the family. So therefore, the person who has to leave this world is most unwilling to leave it, and is always remembering or always wanting to hold on to the warm and the pleasant blissful life, the simple happy life that they have been leading. So he is like kind of casting a very long eager look. He's trying to delay that parting, and he looks upon the world which he has to leave behind with great longing. And his body is kind of dragged towards death, but his soul is continuously looking backwards. Like, when you are leaving from one place to another, and you're not wanting to leave, what happens? You look over your shoulder, you keep looking, you keep turning back and looking at the people whom you are leaving behind. It is something similar to that. So he says that the attraction towards the physical life that the person has lived, that attraction is very strong, and at the time of death, the person is not ready to leave this world very easily. So there is that anxiousness of going into the other world. Then in the third paragraph, you continue, he says, on some fond breast the parting soul relies. On fond breast, fond means loving, caring. And this is reference to your loved ones. When the person is dying, when the person is about to depart this from this world, what do you look for? You want to be surrounded by your loved ones. You don't want to die alone. You don't want to die neglected. You want that those people who love you, your family, your friends, they should be around you when the final time comes, when the final time for you to depart this world comes. So he says, on some fond breast the parting soul relies. Parting soul is reference to the person who's about to leave this world, who's about to die. So that person depends on the loving friendship or the loving family or the loving children. And what do they expect? They expect some pious drops the closing eye requires. They are wanting that somebody should shed some tears at the approach of their death. I have written, you can see in the bottom of the page, I have put number 1 and I have explained it. I have put it there in pen, and I have written, this indicates both attachment and sorrow at the imminent parting. Attachment and sorrow because the person who's leaving is totally attached to his family and friends, right? So obviously when you're attached to something and you're supposed to leave it, you're going to feel sad, then sorrow is going to accompany it. So these feelings, these two feelings come hand in hand. This emotion comes hand in hand. When you are attached to something, it is difficult for you to leave. And when you realize that finally you have to leave this place, finally you have to leave the loving embrace of your family and friends, you feel sorrow, you feel deep pain, and you feel reluctant to depart from this world. So he says that some tears, some pious drops, some loving tears, the parting eye requires. The person who's about to die at least wants to look, or there is a kind of, the person draws some kind of assurance that yes, I am loved, not only when I was living, but even after death, I shall be loved and I shall be remembered respectfully and lovingly. So the poet says, even from the tomb, the voice of nature cries. Why voice of nature cries? It's natural. Even from the tomb, even when the person is dead, even when the person is being buried, it is natural that the person who is being buried, who's being put into that grave, that person is crying for life. That person is crying that he should be remembered. He wants his memory to remain there. And it is all natural. It is something that is experienced by everyone. It is nothing unusual. And even in our ashes live their wanted fires. Wanted means accustomed, used to. So even in our ashes, when we have been burnt, because when finally our bodies turn to ashes, even there is some fire of expectation. It is common, that fire that used to burn in us when we were alive, that the desire that was there, that we should be loved, we should be respected, we should be remembered, that fire even is there in our ashes. Even after death, that expectation for love, that expectation for respect, that continues to remain in our dust, in our ashes. And he says that those ashes, you can say, instead of the body, it is the soul, right? The body finishes, the body comes to an end. The dust goes into dust, it becomes one with dust, but the soul is still there, the soul still exists, and the soul keeps expecting that he or she should be remembered fondly. And whatever is being inscribed on the tomb, whatever is being written on the tombstone, that kind of becomes a memory, or that kind of becomes a sign that whoever will come and read these lines will automatically remember the person who has left this world, or the person who lies in this grave. So you can see that in these three paragraphs, the poet has kind of given a very clear description of the feelings of a person who's about to depart from this world, of the natural feelings that we as humans experience when we are alive, the natural feelings that we as humans experience when we are about to die, when we are about to depart from this world. And very beautifully, that sentiment has been captured by Thomas Gray in these lines, and very exactly he describes all that a person feels and experiences when he is about to depart from this world. So, I'll end here. The fourth paragraph is also there on the screens, but this is connected to the next couple of paragraphs, and I will continue that in one go, because here from this fourth paragraph, the tone, or you can say the person whom the poet is talking about, whom the poet is going to address, is himself. He's going to talk about how he is going to be remembered after his death. So, that I will do in the next lecture. Once again, thank you for being here, and I will see you again tomorrow. Till then, bye bye.